Something just happened in the skies over China, and the world's two biggest aircraft makers were not ready. No press conference, no Hollywood-style unveiling. Just a silent 12,000-kilometer test flight that shook the aviation industry to its core. The aircraft? China's C929, a brand new wide-body jet developed by COMAC that just went from doubtful prototype to potential world-class threat in a single move. For decades, the long-haul market has belonged to Boeing and Airbus. Their aircraft, the 787 Dreamliner and A350, rule the skies with no real rivals. But now, that monopoly is being challenged, and not by a startup, by a state-backed aviation power with global ambitions. The C929 isn't a regional jet. It's not a cheap imitation. It's a full-scale intercontinental aircraft designed to fly further, carry more, and cost less than anything Boeing or Airbus can offer. And as of this year, it's no longer theoretical, it's flying. If you're into real stories that cut through PR spin and expose the battle for global tech dominance, hit that like button to boost this to more people. And subscribe now if you want more no-fluff deep dives like this. What's coming next? Let's just say Boeing won't like it. 5 years ago, this would have sounded like science fiction. China, a country still dependent on Western engines and avionics, now fielding a wide-body aircraft that can fly non-stop from Beijing to Chicago with a 280-passenger capacity and aiming for full domestic control over its components. Unthinkable. Until now. The C929 project began as a joint venture with Russia, branded as the CR929, with China providing the money and production, and Russia providing aerospace expertise. But after the war in Ukraine and rising tensions over tech sharing, the partnership collapsed. Everyone expected the project to die. Instead, China took over the whole thing. They rebranded it as the C929, kicked development into overdrive, and started replacing foreign parts with homegrown alternatives. Avionics, swapped, airframe design, rebuilt, certification pathways, overhauled. By late 2023, the first flight model was ready, and by early 2025, it had reportedly completed a 12,000-kilometer intercontinental test flight, a symbolic and strategic slap in the face to Western dominance. What's most shocking? This wasn't rushed. This was deliberate, precise, and years in the making. And the message couldn't be clearer. The era of Boeing and Airbus calling the shots is over. There's a new contender in the sky. Rewind to 2016. While the world was fixated on Boeing's 787 rollouts and Airbus expanding its A350 production, something quietly took root in a Shanghai conference room, a joint announcement that most Western analysts brushed off. Russia and China were teaming up to build a wide-body jet, the CR929, a new aircraft with long-haul ambition, dual flags, and a single mission: break the duopoly. On paper, it made perfect sense. Russia's United Aircraft Corporation, UAC, had decades of aerospace engineering experience. China's COMAC had unmatched industrial scale and government funding. They split the responsibilities. Russia would design the aerodynamics and engines, China would handle production and final assembly. Together they pledged over $2 billion to the project. And behind closed doors, that number was climbing fast. Their target? The same market Boeing's Dreamliner had locked down, long-range twin-aisle jets capable of intercontinental missions. Think Beijing to London, Moscow to LA. And for a moment, the plan looked real. Western firms, including Safran, GE and Honeywell, quietly tracked it. Boeing's leadership even issued a memo warning of emerging threats from non-traditional players. What they didn't know, that memo would age like prophecy. But by 2022, that alliance cracked. The war in Ukraine shattered not just borders, but aerospace timelines. As Western sanctions tightened around Russia, the CR929 partnership stalled. Russia's UAC, suddenly under pressure to focus on military platforms, pulled key engineers from the program. Timelines slipped, emails stopped getting answered, components stopped arriving. Then came the real fracture, one that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with power. China wanted access to Russia's proprietary engine tech, including early high-bypass fan designs meant to rival the GEGENX. Russia said no. IP talks broke down. The mood shifted from collaboration to caution. The Dream project became a national security risk. So, in late 2022, Russia walked away. The West exhaled. Boeing strategists dismissed the program as dead on arrival. Aviation media ran obituaries for the CR929, calling it another victim of geopolitics. But here's what no one saw coming. China didn't shelve the aircraft, it rebranded it. The CR929 quietly became the C929, and instead of slowing down, COMAC accelerated. More hiring, more funding, more control. China wasn't just building a plane anymore, it was building a fully independent aviation ecosystem. And by mid-2023, whispers began to leak. COMAC had already begun retooling the fuselage design, sourcing new domestic composites, and restructuring certification workflows with the Civil Aviation Administration of China, CAAC, to match international protocols. Just 5 years earlier, most experts believed China couldn't build a wide-body without Russia. Now? They were building one in silence, and on their own terms. After Russia's exit, many thought China would fold. Instead, COMAC went dark and got to work. The transformation wasn't loud, it was systemic. The Chinese government quietly injected fresh capital, expanding COMAC's R&D footprint in Shanghai and Chengdu, and reassigning top engineers from military aerospace divisions. Dozens of new suppliers, many state-owned, were funneled into one mission: make the C929 100% survivable without foreign support. They weren't just trying to replace parts, they were building an entirely new industrial spine. Insiders say that by late 2023, COMAC had assembled a working mock-up of the C929's full fuselage cross-section, complete with structural revisions made possible by Avic's latest composite molding technology, previously used only in military drones. Even Boeing insiders, speaking anonymously, admitted the pace was unexpected. One CAAC official reportedly told internal regulators, "The goal is not to compete. The goal is to remove dependency permanently." And that's exactly what happened. Western avionics providers once baked into the CR929 blueprint, like Honeywell and Rockwell Collins, were quietly replaced. Chinese firms like AVIC Avionics and the Shanghai Aircraft Design Institute were handed the controls. Everything from navigation systems to flight control computers began migrating inwards. And the deeper you looked, the more obvious it became. This was no longer a joint project. It was a sovereign program. While aviation journalists were busy tracking production delays at Boeing and certification bottlenecks at Airbus, COMAC's progress flew under radar, literally. Instead of flashy PR, China used a familiar strategy. Build quietly, then shock the world. In early 2024, satellite imagery revealed new activity at COMAC's Zhangjiang testing facility, including runway modifications and hangar expansions large enough to accommodate a wide-body frame. Analysts initially assumed it was for a larger C919 variant. They were wrong. By mid-2024, insider leaks suggested subsystem integration trials had begun, with early power distribution units and environmental controls being live tested on modular rigs. These weren't models, these were functional systems, simulating real in-flight conditions. A leaked internal report from Avic, later scrubbed, claimed the C929's cabin pressure regulation system passed stress thresholds 10% higher than required under ICAO long-haul standards. And while no full prototype had yet flown, parts of the C929 were already airborne, mounted onto modified C919 testbeds to gather flight data without alerting global media. At this point, even Western defense analysts began to whisper a new phrase: "This isn't vaporware anymore." And just like that, the narrative shifted. What was once seen as an over-ambitious paper project was now being called the most serious non-Western wide-body challenge in aviation history. Not because it had already flown, but because it was closer than anyone dared to admit. This isn't just a scaled-up C919. The C929 is a clean-sheet wide-body design built to compete directly with the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350, not just in size, but in technology, comfort, and cost of ownership. Its wingspan stretches close to 65 meters, longer than the Dreamliner. The cabin width is over 5.5 meters, giving airlines more flexibility for seating configurations, from spacious 9-abreast economy to premium cabin layouts optimized for long-haul fatigue. But the size isn't the headline. The structure is. Over 50% of the C929's airframe is made from carbon fiber composites. That's a dramatic leap from COMAC's earlier aircraft and even slightly higher than the A350. Add to that another 15% titanium content in key load-bearing areas, and you're looking at a jet built for fuel efficiency, corrosion resistance, and durability on ultra-long-haul routes. Inside the skin, things get more interesting. The aircraft will feature smart avionics with adaptive digital flight displays, ambient cockpit lighting to reduce pilot strain, and a real-time systems monitoring suite, similar to what the 787 pioneered, but rumored to have expanded diagnostic bandwidth across hydraulic, electrical, and thermal systems. Translation: airlines get predictive maintenance and lower unplanned downtime, two of the most expensive pain points in modern fleets. Then there's the cabin. And here COMAC didn't hold back. Designers focused heavily on passenger experience, incorporating noise reduction materials, adaptive LED lighting, and modular seating options designed to fit the needs of both Chinese domestic carriers and international partners. Leaked renderings show larger windows, wider aisles, and an interior layout reportedly inspired by both the A350's minimalist design and Embraer's ergonomic seat spacing. And here's the kicker. This level of innovation is being delivered at a cost projected to be 15 to 20% lower than Boeing or Airbus equivalents, especially for Belt and Road aligned markets. It's not just a technical win, it's an economic weapon. The C929 isn't just built in China, it's protected in China. Final assembly takes place inside the Shanghai Pilot Free Trade Zone, a facility that's as much a geopolitical firewall as it is a manufacturing line. Why there? Because the FTZ gives COMAC tax exemptions, faster import or export clearances, and perhaps most importantly, full control over data and intellectual property. Western firms can't just walk in and snoop. International oversight is minimal, and every bolt turned, every part scanned, stays inside China's digital border. It's no accident. This aircraft isn't just meant to fly, it's meant to represent full-spectrum aerospace sovereignty. And the implications go deeper. Assembly lines are embedded with domestically developed robotics, rumored to include AI-assisted inspection systems that scan for microfractures and fatigue stress in composite panels in real time. Unlike Boeing's Everett plant, which relies heavily on legacy systems and tiered outsourcing, COMAC's line is vertically integrated. Less third-party involvement, more internal control. One engineer from the Shanghai Aircraft Design and Research Institute, speaking under anonymity, said, "We learned from the Dreamliner delays. Every failure Boeing suffered, we studied and adapted. By locking down assembly in a tightly secured zone and localizing the entire process, from avionics to seating to fuselage joinery, China isn't just building a jet. It's building an aerospace fortress the West can't penetrate. And every week that the C929 moves forward behind those closed hangar doors, the duopoly gets more nervous. If the C929 is China's aerospace sword, then the engine is its blade. And for decades, that blade has been blunt. Let's be clear, engines have always been China's weak spot. The C919, China's narrow-body jet, still depends on the LEAP 1C, a Western-made engine co-developed by General Electric and Safran. The same kind of dependency that has allowed the US to control access, restrict exports, and even delay certification timelines. But with the C929, China is aiming to break that chokehold. Enter the CJ2000, a next-generation turbofan engine under development by the Aero Engine Corporation of China, AECC. This isn't a side project. This is a national priority. According to AECC insiders, the CJ2000 is being designed to deliver up to 35 tons of thrust, putting it directly in the performance bracket of the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 and GE's GEnx, both of which power the Boeing 787. It features a 3-meter fan diameter, an ultra-low bypass ratio for better fuel economy, and a new generation of ceramic matrix composites to handle high turbine temperatures with less weight. In other words, China is going for parity. Originally, the CJ2000 was intended for the C919, but technical hurdles pushed it off the timeline. That delay might have looked like failure, until now. Because now the CJ2000 is back in development, re-engineered for the wide-body mission. AECC has already begun component bench testing. Early prototypes of fan blades and compressor stages are reportedly showing efficiency benchmarks within 10% of GE's latest models. And China's plan? Test it on the C929 by 2029, fully certify it by 2031, and mass-produce it for export-ready airframes. If that happens, if the CJ2000 hits commercial certification, it won't just be a win for COMAC, it'll be a geopolitical earthquake, because for the first time ever, a non-Western country will own both the aircraft and the engine, the entire propulsion ecosystem. No export licenses, no parts restrictions, no US State Department approval, just leverage, strategic leverage, and in aviation, that's power. But what's a powerful jet without buyers? Here's where the West really needs to worry, because while Boeing and Airbus fight each other in saturated markets like Europe and North America, China is playing an entirely different game. It's using the Belt and Road Initiative to open runways instead of roads. COMAC isn't just trying to sell the C929, it's embedding it into the infrastructure of developing countries, from Southeast Asia to Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, where airport terminals are already being financed, built, or upgraded by Chinese state firms. Imagine this. A country gets a loan to build a new terminal from a Chinese bank. The construction is done by a Chinese contractor. The radar and ATC systems come from Huawei's Aerospace division. And when it's time to fly? The aircraft on the tarmac is a C929. That's not a sale. That's a strategic partnership locked in concrete and steel. Insider reports from Beijing's Ministry of Commerce suggest at least 8 countries, including Pakistan, Kenya, and Malaysia, have expressed preliminary interest in acquiring or leasing C929 units once certification is finalized. And here's the clincher. China is reportedly planning to offer state-backed financing and below-market service packages, undercutting Boeing and Airbus on total life cycle cost by up to 25%. Western aerospace CEOs are watching this unfold in silence, because it's not just about performance anymore. It's about who controls the sky above a nation's economy. And for the first time in history, that answer may not come from Washington or Paris. It may come from Shanghai. For over 50 years, Boeing and Airbus have lived in a world without a real third challenger. Even when regional players emerged, Embraer, Bombardier, Mitsubishi, none touched the wide-body segment. None threatened the flagship 787 or A350. The reasons were obvious: massive R&D costs, strict global certification, and the one thing you can't fake, engine supremacy. But the C929 changes that equation. It may not be ready to dethrone the Dreamliner on day one, but it doesn't have to, because Boeing and Airbus aren't just fighting a jet, they're facing a country with state-backed capital, a global supply chain built for resilience, political leverage across 60-plus Belt and Road countries, and the industrial capacity to scale faster than either Western rival. And while Boeing deals with FAA investigations, quality control meltdowns, and supply chain chaos, COMAC is operating under a different timeline, a generational one. One Western analyst put it bluntly: if the C929 gets certified and delivers even moderate fuel efficiency, Boeing's dominance in Asia-Pacific is over. Airbus is better positioned diplomatically, but even it can't compete with a $150 million aircraft that comes with airport upgrades and 20-year financing built in. This isn't just a competition of wings, it's a war of systems. Western firms fight for profit. COMAC builds for power. And when the skies get political, as they always do, airlines will look for partners who can guarantee access, not just aircraft. So what does the C929 really represent? It's not just a plane, it's a line in the sky, dividing what was and what's coming. For decades, long-haul aviation has been a Western monopoly, guarded by certification regimes, export controls, and alliances forged through pressure. The message was clear: you can build jets, but only if we say so. With the C929, China just broke that rule. It built the jet, it's building the engine, it owns the supply chain. And now, it's building the runway to deliver it to the world. This aircraft doesn't just carry passengers, it carries a message. You no longer need Boeing. You no longer need Airbus. You don't need the West. That message may be quiet today. But when the C929 lifts off for its first intercontinental commercial flight, fully certified, powered by a Chinese engine, sold through Chinese financing, and landing in an airport built by Chinese firms, that silence will turn into shockwaves. Boeing and Airbus aren't just looking at a new competitor, they're looking at the future, and this time it's flying east. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening in global aviation, do one thing: hit that like button so more people see what the mainstream isn't talking about. And if you want to stay ahead of these power shifts, from the skies to the boardrooms, make sure you're subscribed. We're just getting started. The future isn't arriving quietly, it's taking off at 35,000 feet. And we'll be right here when it does.